it's time to do that March reading wrap-up. Starting with my 1-star reviews. Controller by Jesse Kellerman. This is another book from Amazon Originals Warmer Collection, and I do have a full video review on all of them coming out, so I'll try to be brief. But the TLDR here is this is the first and only Amazon Originals collection that I have not finished. And the reason is because the characters are terrible. It's a story focused on an aging mother and a son who's come back home to take care of her, squabbling over the temperature in the air-conditioned unit. And both the mother and son are completely insufferable, awful characters. It is obvious that this is the intention of the author. It's not like poor writing on their part. No reason for me to be reading about these awful characters. The story's not really driving or going anywhere. There's a couple of like soft thematic points that I go into a little bit further in the Warmer Collection review, but none of them are worth having a slog through this couple's relationship and issues. Moving into 2-star reviews. Falls to Shadow by Skip Horak. This is another book that's in the Warmer Collection. The writing that Horak provides is very good. There's like some interesting character work going on, some relevant details that felt fun and felt engaging. The overall premise and point of the story is just like a nothing burger. I can barely remember what happened. I think it started us out following this main character who was like an army vet and had owned a lot of land and had got famous doing like a Super Bowl commercial, and his dad had sold the land out from under him, and now he's here at an environmental convention with this billionaire who's got a weird plan to save the earth. All of it was kind of shit. There's just like all these dangling character threads and like all this stuff that's I guess gonna continue to happen. I don't know. You know, as a whole, it's just a lot of bits and bobs that while they were pleasant to read and show earmarks of stuff a good writer would do, it does not come together. Coming in at 3 stars. Easter and the Hare, The Story of Ostara by Two Otters. So this is a kid's pagan picture book that includes like a fun little short story and then like a bunch of activities, foods, and like a basic ritual you could do if you were celebrating spring. I've gotten into like looking for like some more diverse kids picture books and have sort of started experimenting a little bit with it. Overall, I gave this one 3 stars. The pictures are good, the story is cute, although it doesn't provide anything like too deep. Like there's not really a lot of Ostara lore going on here, or mythology like woven in it. It's kind of like its unique own separate story. Ostara waking up for spring, her having like a bird friend, and then turning that bird friend into a rabbit because they fall in love with a rabbit. Like, it's cute. It does end up with like eggs coming from a bunny that will hatch into their children, and it has a reason for that because the bird was turned into the rabbit. I do think it has like some very basic but fun activities you could do during Easter. I think it gives like a lot of fun emphasis you could put on the spring in a modern world for like new beginnings and fresh starts. And moving into 4-star reviews. Mama, What's a Witch by Nico B. Paradies and illustrated by Naya Kichenko. I thought the illustrations on this were great. There were like simple one-line questions or one-line statements to read to a child and then go to the next page, the next picture. So I thought the length was good for like a very young child. And I thought like the overall lesson, morality, that like a witch is just a person, just like anyone else, is kind of fun as well. The overall structure of the writing had like this poetic nursery rhyme kind of feel to it, which I felt was like age appropriate, went with the illustrations well. All of it was working together. A really fun, cute little picture book you read for a young child. Next is going to be The Hillside by Jane Smiley. This is the last last book in the Warmer collection. When I had immediately finished reading it, I was on the fence about giving it 5 or 4 stars, and now that I'm a couple weeks from when I originally read it, I'm actually on the fence about whether or not it should be here in the 4-star category or down in the 3-star. What brings it here in the 4 stars is there's this core element from a horse perspective who is monitoring humans, and they have a favorite human that they think is like special and different from the others, and they're sort of like observing her behavior, connecting with her in a different way, and it's like a special animal human relationship from the quote-unquote animal's perspective. But I think it's trying to offer insight into why human animal relationships are special, what makes them compelling, why we do have like certain favorite animals among others if you're working with a bunch of them, and also making us take a grim look about how you could have all those feelings and still drive for that creature's extermination or end up shooting that creature in the end. It's got a little bit of like a Fox and the Hound kind of vibe going on with it. I did have some issues with how it executes. Like there's a lot of things that don't make sense to me that I detail in the Warmer collection review. And also it's got like a very distinctly indigenous mythology kind of vibe, but as far as I could tell, Jean Smiley doesn't have any experience or relationship with an indigenous culture, and I couldn't find like anywhere where she explained what her inspiration was for having sensitivity readers or anything, and that made me feel vaguely uncomfortable with the premise and where it goes, what it does with it kind of thing. Also, it felt to me like Smiley doesn't really understand the natural world or animals, and she also doesn't understand humanity that well either. Which overall, since this is like an examination of how humans are different than animals and uniquely dangerous for the planet, it just doesn't execute. Next is going to be Halloween Slaughter by Sergio Gomez. This is book 2 in a 3-book trilogy, where the 3rd book, Final Slaughter, just released in February. I liked the 2nd book, Halloween Slaughter, just fine. It doesn't live up to the hype of the 1st book, and I am hoping that we'll go back to those highs of the 3rd book. As a whole, because I know about the killer now, and I know his like mode of operation, what he does or doesn't want to do, there's just less tension in Halloween Slaughter than there was in Camp Slaughter. And likewise, I felt like the pacing was just like a little bit slow. And this whole book is supposed to be culminating into a Halloween party massacre event. Honestly, when we get to the Halloween party, everything about it was super underwhelming, including the amount of people there, the kills, the tension. It was just not hitting the way I really would have liked it to. There were 2 main aspects here that I felt were really tense and effective. One is where the killer captures this one woman who is traveling on a road and her car breaks down. How she interacts with the killer from then on, will she escape or not, or survive or not, is very well done to me. And then the other element is that the killer is stalking this other girl that he wants to put in his like collection of Barbies. He finds her special for whatever reason, and like him always watching her and her sort of like having a sixth sense about it is pretty well done. Of those 2 storylines, the will she won't she escape is the one that has the more satisfying conclusion versus the will he get her, won't he get her for his collection. Also, Halloween Slaughter is just not combining enough things together in a way that's as interesting as Camp Slaughter. Like Camp Slaughter, we had the paranormal investigator, we had the cannibal serial killer, and we had the supernatural element all coming together, and we were learning about this killer for the first time. So like the flashbacks to his childhood and learning more about his parents and all that stuff was really good. But here, I feel like we've explored everything from his past that was worth exploring, so the flashbacks are less valuable. And while there is this interesting supernatural element going on with the one girl he's stalking, it's not like expanded and explained enough. Also, there's like a police chief who's kind of looking for this guy, but the police chief is not like doing enough cat and mouse chasing, pursuing to make that element worth your time either. That said, I do think the police chief element is going to pay off in Final Slaughter, and I'm very excited we're going back to the campground, even though it doesn't make any sense to me that that would be the killer's next strategic move. Teachings of the Great Outdoors by Danish Jermo ceremony. So I thought the overall message of this picture book was great, and there were a lot of comparisons between things that you could want to be as an adult and things that exist in nature. I liked the messaging, I liked the admiration and respect for the natural world, as well as focusing more on characteristics that a person could aspire to versus professions or like status symbols. And I thought the pictures were fine. My one complaint with the writing is that it's a little bit long and wordy. Maybe this is like for an older child, like the ages of like 7 to 10. I guess my issue with that is I think the messaging would be better received by younger children. Too many words, too long on a page. Next is going to be Crimson Skies by Jaymin E. This is the second in the Fallen Fae God series. I read first one, I want to say in February. And I also have a full workshopped it on the first one. As a close to the series, I both did and didn't like this book. I think part of the issue is like there's a very specific plot that I felt like the first book set up that I would have really preferred versus what we got. But if we're looking at this compared to other Jaymin E works, then it's delivering a lot of those things that Jaymin E does well, and it's improving on some of the things that sometimes she like sort of falls flat on. For example, I really appreciated that there are only 2 books about this character's love story and we didn't try to wrap it into a third. There's a lot less exposition in this book and more experiencing of the Fae world. This book is aware of a lot of its problematic and shortfall elements, and it tries to sort of like call it out and make fun of it, which like for me personally was a little bit annoying, and I kind of felt like, well, why didn't you just write a better book? But I think some people are going to find this like a campy, self-aware kind of way to handle the problems of this sort of trope or genre. And surprisingly, this book is not a chosen one narrative, and I kind of assumed it would be based off of my experience in book 1. This book is unfortunately continually referencing the fact that the Fae world has crimson skies, and the skies are crimson because of like the bad thing happening in the book. Pretty obnoxious. But it was really cool that they had like a dragon homeworld dimension that could go different places between other dimensions, like attach itself to that dimension, open it up, invade, and then take all the resources and leave. That was like a fun idea that I was really enjoying. It was like the right level of silly and bonkers and like works for this plot for me. And also I did like the Zack and the Morgan relationship when we finally get to it here in book 2. But it is truly deeply creepy how often Morgan compares Zack and his twin brother Draeger, who she slept with in the last book and thought maybe the 2 of them had something. I mean, it's not just where she is talking about how like Draeger's doing something toxic and Zack is doing something she's okay with. Like, even during, like, the true mating, bonding moment that should have been all about her and Zack, she's, like, comparing this dude and his twin's anatomy and how they react in the moment and who made her feel what and when and how. This is way too much. This is gross. This is the whole reason I find getting together with a sibling's ex to be incredibly squicky. And this to me was worse because the way they explained why Draeger thought that he would be mates with this chick when really it was his twin, that grossed me out. I won't even talk about it, but I did not like it, and it was wild and crazy and upsetting all at once. But if you're wondering if this paranormal romantic fantasy would be for you, some fun stuff this book includes: primal play, a true mate trope, dragon shifters that are really dragony, and a fairly compelling relationship building moment here in the second book. And moving into 5-star reads, There's No Place Like Home by Ian LaPlucky. This book is also part of the Warmer collection, but there's just so much character and charm in this one that you kind of just love it from the go. It has a lot of elements that sort of reminded me of The Parable of the Sower, which is one of my favorite reads of all time. Specifically, this one hones in on like a preteen teenager's relationship with her father after the father has committed suicide, like what that meant, what that father's place and influence is going to be moving on, and what she can do in this world now with one less person providing for her. And I think exploring that relationship between a child and parent is really special, but also her going out into the world, experiencing things for herself, and coming to her own conclusions was really cool. I especially liked how upbeat she was and how determined she was to continue to find joy and to sort of triumph even when she knows that she's probably the last of humanity's kind here on Earth. And last we have At the Bottom of New Lake by Sonia Larson. This one's also in the Warmer collection. It's a wonderful hodgepodge of so many different thematic elements. I felt the writing was beautiful, all of the storytelling was super rich. We're following this teenage girl who has a fascination swimming in the quote-unquote new lake and looking for like old artifacts from where the old barriers of the lake were. So she finds like a coat or like different kinds of glasses and all kinds of stuff, and she's sort of using that to piece together how these people live. So the coat was a very special find because she thought these people only stayed by the lake for the summer, and her teacher's kind of horrified by it because she feels that the global warming that caused the lake borders to expand was a crazy tragedy, and people have lost their homes and it's still like first generation and fresh. But I mean, since it is sort of implied that it's global warming, the teacher does feel a little bit ridiculous. Like the people would have had time to evacuate, so they just abandoned all this stuff and basically left it to pollute the new boundaries of the lake. But that's part of the beauty of the story too, is we're seeing how some people selectively care when it's a tragedy for them and aren't understanding how they've like contributed to pollution or making it worse when they didn't have to. It's a really good read that has a lot of intersectional moments and is combining just like a lot of different themes and ideas and identities together to make something kind of new and fun to experience. And that's going to be everything that I read this past March. I know it was like a little bit of a shorter month, but I'm still adjusting to having the puppy with me. Hopefully there'll be more bigger reads in April. But tell me what your favorite read this March was in those comments down below. And if you got this far in this video, leave me a sun emoji. And as always, keep reading. Bye!